Welcome to everyone. I'm Tommy Jones, today's webinar chair. I am a contractor supporting the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs Tribal Energy Webinar Series. Today's webinar, titled How to Create Partnerships to Advance Tribal Energy Projects, is the sixth webinar of the 2020 DOE Tribal Energy Webinar Series. Let's go over some event details. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website in about 1 week. Copies of today's presentation slides will be posted to the Office of Indian Energy's website shortly after this webinar, if not before. Everyone will receive a post-webinar email with a link to the page where the slides and recording will be located. Because we are recording this webinar, all phones have been muted. We will answer your written questions at the end of the final presentation. You can submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing your question. Let's get started with opening remarks from Rosanna Pierce. Ms. Pierce is a senior engineer and deployment supervisor for the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs and duty stationed in Golden, Colorado. She oversees the deployment program, which is national in scope. Specifically, the deployment program includes financial assistance, technical assistance, and education and outreach. She also implements national funding opportunities and administers some of the resultant tribal energy projects, grants, and agreements. She has over 25 years of experience in project development and management and has been assisting tribes in developing their energy resources for the last 20-plus years. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Colorado State University and pursued a Master's in Business Administration through the University of Northern Colorado. Rosanna, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Tommy, and hello, everyone. I join Tommy in welcoming you to today's webinar. The webinar series is sponsored by the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, otherwise referred to as the Office of Indian Energy. The Office of Indian Energy directs, fosters, coordinates, and implements energy planning, education, management, and programs that assist tribes with energy development, capacity building, energy infrastructure installation, reducing energy costs, and electrification of Indian lands and homes. To provide this assistance, our deployment program works within the department, across government agencies, and with Indian tribes and organizations to help Indian tribes and Alaska Native villages overcome the barriers to energy development. Our deployment program is composed of a three-prong approach consisting of financial assistance, technical assistance, and education and capacity building. This Tribal Energy webinar series is just one example of our education and capacity building efforts. The webinar series is also part of the Office of Indian Energy's efforts to support fiscally responsible energy business and economic development decision-making and information sharing amongst tribes. It is intended to provide attendees with information on tools and resources to develop and implement tribal energy plans, programs, and projects, to highlight tribal energy case studies, which you'll hear a number of them today, and to identify business strategies tribes can use to expand their energy options and develop sustainable local economies. In today's webinar, we are focusing on partnerships in tribal energy development. Many tribal energy projects utilize partnerships to help complete successful projects. Since the form of these partnerships can take many forms, we've decided that case studies might be informative and reflective of various forms of partnership. As such, we have 3 case studies, presentations highlighting successful projects that have utilized multiple partnerships, which have contributed to the success of their projects. We hope this webinar and the series as a whole is useful to you. We also welcome your feedback, so please let us know if there are ways we can make the series better. Before I turn it back to Tommy, I wanted to personally thank the presenters today for giving up their time and in preparing for presenting on today's webinar. Thank you all. And with that, the virtual floor is yours, Tommy. Tommy, are you on mute?
I was on mute. Thank you, Rosanna. Today's presenter slide is up. Before we get to the presentations, I will introduce all of today's presenters. For our first presentation, we will hear from Jana Gagnon. Jana is the Sustainability and Government Affairs Director for the Lake Rancheria, where she has established the tribe's strategy for zero carbon resilience and sustainability. Her development experience includes low-carbon microgrids, electric vehicle infrastructure, strategic planning and sustainability, climate action, mitigation and adaptation, emergency preparedness, and economic enterprise development. She is an appointee to the United States Department of Energy's Indian Country Energy and Infrastructure Working Group, the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management California Task Force, California's Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resilience Technical Advisory Committee, the California AB 617 Consultation Group, and the California SB 350 Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group for the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission. Jana works on policies, programs, and investments to achieve rapid, cost-effective transition to decarbonized and resilient communities. And if there are specific questions for Jana's presentation today, she will be getting off a little early, so we can get those to her and she can respond back to you in a few days. Following Jana, we will have a joint presentation about solar PV projects at the Spokane Indian Housing Authority. There will be three presenters, Clyde Abrahamson, Tim Willink, and John Clancy. Clyde Abrahamson is the development manager for the Spokane Indian Housing Authority. He oversees in-house projects, the weatherization department, and assists with projects involving three bands construction. Over the past few years, Clyde's duties have progressed from project manager duties to grant administration and some grant writing duties. Clyde took part in the Spokane Tribe's first solar project, Children of the Sun Solar Initiative, aka COSI, which was completed in the fall of 2019, installing approximately 650 kilowatts of solar photovoltaics on 9 commercial buildings and 21 single-family homes. Next up, John Clancy is a shareholder at the law firm of Godfrey & Kahn and works out of Madison, Wisconsin. John has had the privilege of working with numerous tribes on environmental and energy matters. John's environmental work with the tribes primarily relates to work to protect reservations from significant environmental impacts and has included working with tribes in obtaining treatment as state status with respect to air and water and Class 1 air designation, as well as working to raise concerns and potential opposition to environmentally impactful projects that could cause significant ground and surface water and or air pollution on reservations. John's energy work with tribes has included helping them to secure federal, state, and private funds for projects and helping them to develop those projects, including working to establish partnerships with taxable entities that can allow for tribes to take advantage of investment tax credits and other tax and financing incentives for the development of energy projects. Next, Tim Willink has served as the Director of Grid Alternatives Tribal Program for 4 years. Tim joined Grid from Namaste Solar, where he worked for 6 years as a field supervisor for commercial solar installations and is a North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners certified PV installation professional. While at Namaste Solar, Tim oversaw more than 4 megawatts of solar PV installations through commercial and residential installs. In addition to working with Grid's regional offices in California, who do extensive solar PV work with tribes on solar PV installation and workforce development, Tim has helped establish Grid's presence with tribes in South Dakota and the Great Plains, in the Southwest on the Navajo Nation, and in Washington State with the Spokane Tribe of Indians. These tribal nations continue to face economic struggles related to energy development and clean energy access, and Tim and the Grid tribal team support with tribes towards their goals of energy sovereignty, job creation, and environmental benefit. Tim has also worked to provide training and employment opportunities through Grid's Solar Corps program to 12 Solar Corps fellows from tribal nations throughout the United States. Tim is Navajo, originally from Pueblo Pintada, New Mexico, and his goal is to continue to partner with tribes on residential and commercial projects in order to bring solar to tribal communities. Our final presentation is another case study presentation covering an innovative solar PV project in Northwest Alaska. The presenters include Sunny Adams and Brian Hirsch. Sunny Adams is the Director of Alternative Energy for NANA Regional Corporation, where he has worked since 2007. He is a graduate of Montana Tech and has a degree in metallurgical and materials engineering. His past experiences include technical oversight of the Red Dog Mine, NANA gravel issues, and shareholder development. Prior to working for NANA, Sunny worked as an operator and metallurgical engineer at the Red Dog Mine. His milling experience includes water treatment, flotation, grinding, and control room operation. And the next is Dr. Brian Hirsch, who is the president and founder of Deerstone Consulting, a renewable energy consulting firm focused on microgrid, utility, and community development in remote locations. Established in May 2015 and based in Anchorage, Alaska, recent and ongoing projects include solar, wind, battery, diesel, hybrid projects across Alaska, biomass heating projects, hydropower, and energy efficiency initiatives. Deerstone has helped clients raise over $40 million for clean energy development. He is currently involved in providing technical support to Alaska Native regional organizations and other groups covering over 120 communities across Alaska and providing grid-scale solar and storage workshops in Central Asia. Thanks to each of our presenters for making the time to join us today. With that, let's get started with our first presentation. Jenna, you may proceed once your slides are up.
Thank you. If you don't mind advancing to the next slide, please. So hello, everyone. First, just a recognition that the tribal nations on this call are dealing with multiple emergencies, including the COVID-19 pandemic. Out in the West, we now have wildfires again, drought, high heat days, and other social, economic, and environmental issues that predate the pandemic, but also are exacerbated by it. So we are doubly grateful for your time today. This introduction is just some quick information on the Blue Lake Rancheria, just to give you all a sense of place and where I do primarily work from. It's a small tribal nation in rural, geographically isolated Northwest California. Though small, the tribe is among the largest employers in its region. It was terminated for 30 years or so between the 1950s and 1980s, and so in many ways it's still rebuilding, as many other tribal nations, tribal communities are as well. Next slide, please. So in thinking about the partnerships the tribe has developed around energy, all partnerships rest against the backstop of the tribe's climate smart resilience strategy. And just as a bit of an aside, if tribes don't yet have a strategy, there are many federal partners, as Lizana was mentioning, available to help develop strategic plans. Technical assistance and a resource library from the Department of Energy, Office of Indian Energy, funding through the Office of Indian Energy grant program, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Tribal Energy Development Programs, and others. The Blue Lake Rancheria strategy is focused on building climate smart infrastructure across the lifeline sectors, as we define them, of energy, water, food, transportation, and telecom, communications, and IT, with the hopeful result that if infrastructure is done right, that these kinds of social, economic, and environmental benefits will follow. We have proven that strategy to be effective, and with our partners have achieved lower greenhouse gas emissions, improved continuity of operations, better health outcomes because of lower air and water pollution in the community, more jobs, more expertise for the tribe. And ultimately, we're driving to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 in concert with our fellow state sovereigns and international partners, which is of course less than 10 years away. We're on track to get there. Next slide, please. So why climate smart? Well, because it's a crisis, it's impacting all of us, and it's accelerating to create hazardous global and local impacts. So literally, as we talk today, here on the North Coast of California, we're experiencing most items on this list: drought, wildfires, air pollution from wildfire smoke, flooding, increased ocean temperatures, sea level rise that is driving very difficult and costly and unequal local impacts and decision making about how to deal with it. Next slide, please. And each tribe will have its own other risks and vulnerabilities. Ours is a clear seismic risk, which poses its own set of follow-on damages to infrastructure. As a specific example, natural gas lines are likely to rupture, landslides disrupt diesel supplies, power outages create other supply disruptions, and of course, you know, the other conditions you can imagine if we have a very large Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and tsunami event. Next slide, please. So what are we doing about all of this? We have developed partnerships to build out clean energy on site, electrified transportation, a new water grid, redundant internet connectivity and emergency communications, and increased on-site food production. All of this activity is supported by energy, and all deliver that benefit stack I mentioned earlier: social, environmental, and economic. And most of this would not be possible without our partners. Next slide, please. So some of you have maybe heard me talk about this before in other forums, but one of the most trusted and enduring partnerships the tribe has developed is with the local university and energy research there, energy research center there. We've relied on the university for capacities we need for understanding feasibility and undertaking individual projects such as the microgrids. We have sourced engineering, project management, grant application help, financial management help, and support through various departments at the university and the Schatz Energy Research Center. If there is a tribal university or another university and/or community college system near your tribal nation, highly recommend exploring collaborations with those stakeholders. A couple of other examples: we often have students, and at times these students are also tribal members, work on feasibility studies for the tribe. We partner with the university and the Schatz Center for another important reason. Their mission is knowledge transfer, which leads to the transfer of expertise to tribal staff and tribal members, and that isn't always the case with third-party for-profit contractors. Another key partner is our regional utility, Pacific Gas and Electric, or PG&E. It took many years of successful participation in their programs, such as demand response, to develop a partnership basis. It doesn't always have to take that long, but in our case, that's sort of how it evolved. And today we make sure to call PG&E to discuss our energy project plans early in the feasibility phase. There are many tribal nations that may not have a relationship or a good relationship with their local utility, but to the extent that their energy infrastructure will require interconnection agreements and other interactions, we've found success by treating that relationship as a partnership, regardless of maybe what sticking point is going on at the time. We've been able to work through many, many issues by taking this approach with our utility. Energy development also requires engagement with others, some of which are listed on this slide. The Public Utilities and Energy Commission programs in California have been sources of funding for us. And those interactions and the successful projects that have resulted broaden the partnerships into policy and planning and other strategic collaborations. Next slide, please. So the microgrids and energy systems that we all build on tribal lands will have ongoing O&M. And further, tribes may want to expand their energy infrastructure in phases. And so what starts as maybe a construction partnership can grow into a multi-year or multi-decade cooperative relationship. And because our infrastructure fulfills critical needs during emergencies, the Blue Lake Rancheria has also developed close partnerships with other response agencies at the local, state, and national levels. These are operational collaborations, and in addition, sometimes there are funding opportunities such as pre and post disaster funding that pops up here and there. Our partnerships on climate science and guidance are many. We work with NOAA, NASA, the National Congress of American Indians, Climate Task Force, other tribal climate experts, the state of California, and all our neighbors in our region, including other tribal nations, cities, counties, coastal commission, and others. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to include a brief example of how our partnerships and this climate smart infrastructure is working. In our region, we've had a few preemptive multiple day power outages. These events are where the electrical grid is proactively taken down to prevent wildfires from the grid infrastructure. And during these events, our microgrids did what we had planned for them to do. They operated independently of the grid, supplying power to the tribe's main campus of businesses and government operations. This success story was the culmination of partnerships. The tribe supplied the region, provided life-saving lodging for people who needed power medical devices, supported internet connections for emergency communications, local businesses, and the general public. The outages prevented wildfires, and our microgrids, which were built via partnerships, provided critical infrastructure that served the tribe and the broader region. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, Blue Lake Rancheria is a small tribe, so obtaining capacity through partnerships is a necessity for the government. And when we think about how to improve energy resilience and reduce greenhouse gases from the energy and electrified transportation sectors, we can explore alliances that make it possible. For example, microgrids are complicated and require expertise, 24/7 response. They must act safely with respect to the larger grid, and ideally they will create grid-wide balancing benefits. So ours will provide the opportunity to increase demand response. We can take more electric loads offline when our neighbors in the Central Valley need air conditioning because of excessive heat days, for example. The point is that the benefits of these systems accrue to many entities: the tribe, the utility, the research community, the grid, emergency response agencies, tribal members, the business community, the general public, and the region. And thinking through who will benefit from any given energy initiative provides a starting point for who your partners may be. And then thinking through which entities are best to be in the management role for each project is important. It may be that an energy project starts out one way. Let's say the tribe owns and operates it, but then costs or operational efficiencies drive a change. It's good to think about the long game and keep partnerships positive in case somebody else needs to lead. Here I'm thinking again about the relationship between tribal utilities and regional utilities. The energy and transportation landscape is shifting pretty rapidly, and what is cost effective and feasible today may not be tomorrow, or the reverse. What is not cost effective today may be cost effective tomorrow. So a colleague was distinguishing between the sometimes mandated relationship between tribes and utilities, questioning whether that was a partnership. Our approach has been to assume it will be a partnership or become one over time as the people involved get to know each other and have confidence in each other's abilities. Next slide, please. I've been asked over the years on how to initiate partnerships or how we have done it. And the partnership cases outlined in this webinar give some insights. But the bottom line is, in most cases, we just picked up the phone. We scheduled informational meetings. We started with projects that were lower stakes and more sure-footed, where all partners were relatively assured a successful outcome, and then we built from there. I have some other partnership examples here on this slide, but the mix will depend on what each tribe is undertaking, obviously. For our residential clean energy and transportation program, we have convened an array of allies, the Schatz Research Center and our universities, PG&E, Grid Alternatives, tribal homeowners and tenants, local volunteers who are primarily tribal members and students. All of this collaboration results in solar systems and EV charging for tribal residences, more affordable and accessible EV charging infrastructure, greater access to electric vehicles and electrified public transit, and many other benefits. And then I guess another point in this is that in our rural, relatively underserved region, we also look for ways to be more coordinated and achieve economies of scale. So for example, we partnered with the local Community Choice Aggregation, or CCA entity, Redwood Coast Energy Authority, on electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So the tribe installed the stations themselves, and then with a memorandum of understanding, Redwood Coast Energy Authority conducts the O&M and handles the customer interactions and revenue. And this particular partnership is making electrified transportation in our region more accessible and achieves more economies of scale, particularly for lower income residents. Next slide, please. We have partnerships that are also focused on education, workforce development, and other initiatives. There's details on this that I won't go into, but it is a concerted and focused part of our strategy to think about the wraparound supports for energy development. STEM education, skill building, targeted expertise, and building these out within the tribal community, especially where these resources maybe are not very robust in rural or underserved areas, is an important focus for us. And there's an array of partners for these initiatives as well. Next slide, please. And my last sort of partnership example is a new innovative initiative called the Toma Resilience Campus. In part because the tribe had proven its emergency response capabilities, it received disaster relief funding from the EDA to construct the Toma. This is a new physical and virtual facility dedicated to the new zero carbon marketplace that we must grow to stabilize our economies, our climate, and our communities. Over 20 partners are on board to help us build out and deliver the goals and components of this campus. And once built, the Toma will enable us to bring more resources to our rural and tribal areas, including targeted credentialing. This is key. So a specific example of how we're under-resourced in some of these professional areas is that if a tribal member wants to become an electrician, the nearest training for that is a 6-hour drive away. We want to bring more of those kinds of trainings and resources to our region to build climate smart resilience across the area. And we're doing that with extraordinary partnerships with the tribe in the lead. Next slide, please. So in terms of energy, this is our guiding phrase: power everything we do with electricity and create that electricity from zero carbon sources. Our partners really have helped make that phrase a reality. And these are a couple of the resources that we have used to ground our strategies and our infrastructure deployments. Next slide, please. And finally, I'll just say that, you know, I think we're going to hear from a group of speakers today who have done a very successful and extraordinary job of building out partnerships across all the areas that tribal nations would need to consider for energy projects. I want to thank our hosts, and thanks to my colleague panelists, whom I respect and admire very much. And I'm wishing all of you strength, perseverance, and very good health in this extraordinary time. Thank you so much. And if there are any questions, please email me at the email here, and I promise I'll respond as soon as I'm able. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. We will continue with the next presentation.
Thank you, Jana, and thank you, Tommy. My name is Tim Willink, and I'm Director of the Tribal Program at Grid Alternatives. Yat Tim Willink and Chef Nakaitna Nishla Bilakana Bashchin Kiani. I'm originally from Pueblo Pintado on the Eastern Agency of Navajo Nation. And like Jana, I want to thank Lizana and her team for providing this forum and inviting us to present. And also want to thank my fellow presenters who I also admire and think of highly. And again, just want to also take a moment to send thoughts out to Indigenous nations on the front line dealing with this pandemic. And hopefully they are all safe and healthy and will remain so as we move forward. Next slide, please. So again, here's our content. We're going to talk a little bit about our program. We have a video on our initiative with the Spokane Nation. And then again, our partnership, a little bit of history. We did a demonstration project in 2015 with the Spokane Nation, the last year's project, and then our future partnership as we move forward. Next slide. Next slide, please. So again, just a little bit about Grid Alternatives. You know, again, we're a nonprofit, and we provide hands-on training in solar PV to low to moderate incomes communities. We, you know, again, we feel that this technology, solar PV, the technology, but also the job training, the career path shouldn't be limited to communities who have resources. This technology, environmental benefits and economic benefits and cost savings should be available to everyone. So we started out, you know, we also, again, part of that is not just installing and developing these projects and then leaving these communities. We believe in incorporating them in workforce development and training and the hands-on training. You know, Grid, we have about 6 offices in California where we started and we're primarily located. We also have an office in the Washington, D.C. area. We have a Colorado office in Denver. We have an international program, and we have a tribal program, and that's where we are in Denver. Next slide, please. So again, just a little bit of overview. We started out in January 2010 with our North Coast office with an install. We mainly do single-family residences, and again, it's been the bulk of our projects are in California. My office, we work on helping and guiding them and providing technical assistance and sharing ideas and collaborating with those offices. Our main offices that work with tribes are the San Diego office, the Inland Empire office in Southern California, as well as our North Coast office in Northern California. Again, we work with the local utilities and state rebates to help facilitate these installs. Currently, we have about 743 tribal installations. Again, over 800 families served. We're doing a lot, over 5 megawatts. When I started about 5 years ago, we're still in the 1.5 megawatts. We've done a lot in those times. And again, part of us, we've had 662 tribal participants who identify as American Indian Alaska Native. We have a number, I will every once in a while show our pictures of our installs. Those photos on this slide are from off-grid projects on the Navajo Nation in Arizona, where we are refurbishing a number of systems out there to make sure they're up and running. And you see a lot of our volunteers in hard hats and our trainees. Next slide, please. So again, just getting to the root of the matter with our partnership with Spokane Nation. Again, this started out as a long, it seemed like it's gone by quickly, but it's a long haul. I think we started out in 2015. Just as an idea, we're working with the Housing Authority. Really have to give a shout out to Jason Campbell, Sovereign Energy. He's a tribal member who really brought us all together. We were all on phone calls, from our respective areas, had never met together, and tried to go together with this concept and what we brought to the table. Again, a number of regular phone calls. We culminated in 4 homes on the Spokane Nation. And again, really introduction. It's hard to talk about solar, I think, in a lot of these areas if there isn't solar around. I think they had 1 project, and it was probably like a far out concept and stuff. But when we actually got installing, it really introduced our model and our workforce development. We work with Sovereign Power and the Housing Authority on every aspect. Interconnection applications, work with the local utility, procurement, getting everything delivered, all the logistics and stuff like that. Everybody was really on board with that. And again, it was a really good kind of dip your toe in the water, do a demonstration project, see what we're all about, see if we want to move forward with the partnership. And everybody felt good after this. It was a great time. I think that this photo is again of one of our solar installation supervisors from the Eastern Band of Cherokee. He was with our team at the time, and Jesse Ramos, who is a Spokane tribal member. He works for the Housing Authority, and so he got the direct training on this. So again, installing the systems, seeing how low maintenance they are, saving money and stuff like that. And then after that, we had to, we decided to collaborate on a bigger project, and Tim Horan and John Clancy, and Clyde, who you'll hear from later, and Stephen Soodle, decided, okay, this is great, but let's see what resources are out there, and they enlisted John Clancy. And then we collaborated on a larger grant for the DOE, the Office of Indian Energy. I will say during this time, just getting the rural nature, the logistics of traveling, flying into Spokane, all that stuff was just a real learning experience for us, and we were able to take those lessons to the bigger project. I knew we had a good project and a good partnership when we had a luncheon at the end of this project, and Clyde showed up with a grill in the back of his truck and didn't have a spatula, and he was flipping burgers with one of the standoffs. So it was really funny. We just improvised and got it done and had a good lunch and celebrated. Next slide, please. So again, we were successful in culminating with the grant, with all the partners involved. Again, a number of meetings, long process. Everybody brought something to the table. We all agreed on how to move forward. And then, there's a lot of paperwork involved and the unique financial structure of the build. Again, it took a long time. We were mainly the labor on the project. We had to adapt our model for grid. Usually we do a lot more. But it culminated in this project last year, I think starting in March. Again, it's about 650 kilowatts, 9 tribal buildings. It was our biggest build by far to date, 23 residential units. We incorporated, again, workforce development. We had worked with the Taro office. Just a huge shout out to the Housing Authority and all of their employees. They were so welcoming and adaptable themselves, providing a place to stage, and just, they hosted us on a number of different times. And it was just a very, very accommodating. I think one in that building in the picture, was our makeshift office that Stephen Soodle provided for us, internet access. And again, it was a long haul, but it was good, hard work, and we were able to accomplish the vast majority of it, and we have a great project. Again, this is the housing. These are Housing Authority buildings. this is the, I forget, the force account building. So we put a number of mods on that and it's up and running. And then the other picture on the top right is us working on a residential unit. Next slide. Can we just go ahead and show this video? This is the drone footage of the project that we took afterwards and added some graphics. This is the public safety building, first responders. These are the elder units. They're duplexes. This is the actual housing authority building. Uh-oh. These are a number of residential units that we did. This is the fish hatchery. This is the tribal admin building. This is a big, along with the fish hatchery, they were 100 kilowatts each. Great, thank you. Next slide, please. And again, we had a number of different partners. Again, we mentioned collaborating on, first and foremost, Spokane Housing Authority, the Spokane Nation, Jason Campbell and Sovereign Power, who really played a role in getting us all together. John, and a lot of the meetings and stuff. John Clancy, who you hear from later, from Godfrey Kahn. Again, thanks to the Office of Indian Energy for financial and technical support for this project. Sunvest was our outside investor, and again, the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, who's administered by Tongchi Claremont. And again, this is part of our workforce development. This photo, this is Wyatt Atkinson. He was our solar installation supervisor on the project, and a number of folks from the tribe, and also Josh Castillo, one of our solar core. We're just going over racking and layout and different components. This is how we attach everything to the roof and stuff before we get up on the roof. And this is at the fish hatchery. Next slide, please. Again, how do we get here? You know, just tons of, you know, regular meetings of like-minded folks who bring everything to the table, something to the table. You know, just on a regular scheduled meeting. Again, developing the project scope and everybody's responsibilities and the parameters. You know, again, a lot of that came from Spokane Nation and Tim Brand and Clyde's vision. You know, after that, we actually did site visits after we got the grant, physical site visits, and we had to adapt some of our project a little bit. Again, be a little adaptable for stuff that didn't work. Design and engineering, and working with the Vista, the local utility. You know, to make sure everything was compliant. Again, we had figured out like there was a 100 kilowatt limit on any project. Procurement, you know, logistics, where are we going to stage, where we keep all this stuff. There's a warehouse that the tribe provided us for us, and this is the other side of that force account building where there's a big yard. And then again, working construction in the Taro office, and again, just getting the ideas and the vision from Siha and the tribe. What do they want the training to encompass? And again, just constant phone calls. This is every morning we do a safety talk. We do a scope of work. We meet here in this yard, and this is us doing stretch and flex before we got going. We get in a circle, and somebody would lead stretches to get us warmed up. And again, a lot of hard work went into this. Next slide, please. Again, construction and install. This is a big project, a big timeline. Again, just very accommodating, up to date. You know, we shift midstream perhaps on projects, and the tribe was always involved, and the housing authority. Again, just more acknowledgement for folks. Can't say enough about Tim Moran, Clyde Abrahamson, and Stephen Soodle. One guy I want to call out, he just texted me yesterday. Ed Nicodemus was our local electrician, so we tried to hire locally. I think he's a tribal member. He was great. We trained him up a little bit, but he helped us on the AC side. Again, other things that are going to be involved is O&M training. Again, through this project, we're train tribal members on conducting some O&M, make sure these things last and also internally. A lot of big impact, a lot of cost savings, and again, a lot of fun. You know, these photos, this is the West End, the upper one is the West End Community Center. We had an intern from the Navajo Nation. Her name's Gwen Sosi. She's at the bottom. Myself, Josh Castillo, and then actually my son is a solar installer. He's up on the right. And then the bottom pictures, our crew posing for a big project with one of our construction managers from our California offices, Jose. Next slide, please. Again, lessons learned. You know, this was a long haul. You know, just it was a big project. Just making sure we have realistic timelines and expectations. I think we ran over a fair amount. It was a big commitment. Lots of project management and field work. Travel was a big issue. You know, we stayed there on the Spokane Nation. Again, it's an hour away from the nearest hotel, basically. So they were gracious in providing us homes that we can live in while we worked. Again, some other logistical stuff was lack of cell service a lot of times. And again, you always in the construction industry and solar industry is no exception. Curveballs, you know, weather. Every once in a while, we'd have somebody not show up and stuff. How we deal with that. Again, a lot of positive outcomes. Excuse me. You know, families in the tribe now saving money for 25 years. Workforce development. Again, there's folks who will work for the tribe who got a really good experience in the construction industry, training on the forklift. Again, I have every confidence in guys like Jesse Ramos, Cedric, Franco, Ed, other folks like that who have been trained in fall protection. You see us all equipped up with hard hats, getting up on the roof, knowing all the components. You know, we can walk them through some of the more extensive work, but just making sure everybody's safe and being able to manage these systems. Next slide, please. Again, our keys to making it work: trust, again, in all partners. You know, over communicate on multi levels. You know, if you follow up with email and writing, phone calls, and also in person. And then just very clear expectations, ask questions, make sure everybody's on the same page. Be adaptable. You know, stuff's going to happen. You know, something's not going to show up, or something's going to happen and we got to shift, whatever the case may be. We had a lot of folks coming, being part of this project, just incorporating them. And again, just a really good partnership on our end from Grid Alternatives. Next slide. So yeah, since then, you know, after this, we've decided to move forward with another project. We were fortunate enough to be awarded, again, a lot of the same partners. And it was I think a lot less phone calls this go around, but a larger scope and a more familiarity with everybody. There's a lot of trust built there. Again, we're excited about more skills, field development on this future project for tribal citizens and the housing authority. I love this picture. This is the tribal building. Everybody's working. This is our thing. You know, everybody's tied in. Everybody's busy, just doing different scopes of the work, wiring, glass, all kinds of stuff. You know, again, from all different tribal nations across the country, but mainly Spokane Nation tribal members. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. You know, everybody, again, thank you, Lizana, Kevin Frost, and all of the staff not only for financial support, but also technical assistance and always supporting our program. I also want to take a chance to thank my staff and Grid Alternatives. They work tirelessly throughout this project and continue to do so to bring more solar PV and workforce development to Indian country. Thank you.
This is John Clancy, following up Tim on his presentation. Again, I'm an attorney. I live and work in Madison, Wisconsin, but I'm fortunate to work with a bunch of tribes throughout the country on energy and environmental projects. And this is one of the most fun projects I've worked on, in large part because of what Tim was talking about. You know, a variety of folks getting together and working in partnership to make this work and work well, I think, for both the tribe and the housing authority. If you go to the next slide, please. So Tim went over a lot of the partners here, which obviously includes the Department of Energy, Office of Indian Energy, which was, as Tim noted, very helpful, both in funding and in technical and other support in the project, and really just the communications that occurred regularly to make sure that everybody's on the same page moving forward. I also wanted to note, though, that HUD was also helpful in the project and has been helpful with the Spokane Indian Housing Authority in general as it's been pursuing clean energy development. I'll talk about that a little bit too. The other folks listed here are basically the same ones that Tim listed. It's one thing to point out is that there's both a solar general contractor and a solar tax investor. They're related entities in the sense of ownership, but they provide two different functions. Obviously, one was to the general contractor, making sure the work got done, and they're the ones that hired Grid as the labor subcontractor, which was very, very helpful to the project, both in terms of getting the work done and also in terms of all the training that was done by Grid, which has really built up the workforce on the reservation. And then the tax investor I'll talk about in more detail in terms of how that structure worked and how they brought real value to the project. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I'll address HUD first a little bit because they were involved both earlier on and then later in the project. For folks that are involved on the call or the webinar from tribal housing authorities, you're probably aware of this, but others may not be aware of it. The HUD ONAP offices kind of throughout the country have a technical training and assistance program, which is helpful for a number of issues for tribal housing, but it's also helpful for tribes with housing related projects or even other projects where you're looking at bringing on either renewable energy or like larger energy efficiency projects and trying to figure out how to finance them. So they have a TA that focuses on this issue, or that you can use the TA program to focus on this issue basically. And I got to know Tim Horan, I think because of a DOE event I spoke at, and perhaps a HUD event, but then he also asked for this TA originally, which was used, involved me and others, and one of them involved, or actually, one later on, the later on one involved Tim Willink at Grid. But the first one was really focused on, what do we do now? The Housing Authority and the tribe have very strong clean energy goals, but how can we fund projects and make them work? So it went through the various funding sources federally, as well as state programs, as well as how does net metering work for the utility that serves the tribe and the Housing Authority? What are the rates at issue, the utility rates, and how can we make it work? So that TA led to a generalized plan, which led to the original DOE grant application going in, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. And then secondly, a follow-up TA occurred after the grant was awarded to really try to work together with everybody involved in the project, including Grid Alternatives, about how do we make this project work well. There were modifications that were needed to the project because the utility told us some additional rules they wanted us to meet with net metering and things like that. So that was used then to plan out how does the project go from there, from getting the grant. And it also focused on how do we, if possible, meet the cost share without having to use tribal funds for that. And that's where we focused on the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, which has Wells Fargo funding and administered by Grid that Tim referenced before, and I'll talk to you how that fits in too. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is a slide that's hopefully helpful to you all if you're interested in that training and technical assistance available through HUD. You just click on this link. It's a real simple 2-page application to fill out, and it. One thing I want to note is that I think it's really valuable technical assistance that can sometimes work real well also with the DOE technical assistance, which is more kind of technical in nature. This one's more financial in nature. This one's more how do we make projects work from a financial point of view, what grants are available, what makes sense to pursue, how do the utility rates fit in, how does net metering fit in, all those kinds of things. How can we think through a project from a financial point of view? And typically this is done with an on-reservation, like 2-day or so TA that gets real intensive about what will work on your reservation. These are now being conducted, online more because of through like Zoom type calls because of what's going on with COVID. But that's worked really well as well, I think, because we're able to break it down and have a 2-hour meeting or an hour meeting about a certain topic and then move on and build out projects. That's going on right now with a number of projects. And then HUD, if you fill out this form, it'll go to your local ONAP office for your tribe or housing authority, and then they'll put the project basically in contact with one of the providers, which then brings in someone like me and others to help you think through your projects. So it was real valuable to this project, mostly because it allowed for a lot of planning to occur and to build up kind of the knowledge base to get the partnerships together and then go forward in the project. So very valuable in this project. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to just talk a little about the financial structure of the project, how it was put together financially. It's about a $2 million project, which I'll get into more detail on later on, but it basically has 3 components that made it financially work, basically. The biggest one is the grant that was received as a $1 million grant from the DOE Office of Indian Energy. And the second thing, though, that really helped make it work was to address the cost share under the federal grant, the DOE grant, through tax credit funding or tax credit financing, where that financer or that funder paid for the remainder of the project and then gave credit for the tax credit amount to the project. And that value was about $600,000. So together, those 2 things covered, basically $1.6 million out of the little bit over $2 million project. So it really did a lot to make it much more cost effective and to make it viable. But there still was about $400,000 or more due to make the project whole, basically to pay for the whole project. And that's where the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund really stepped in and helped out a lot. And I'll talk about that a little bit too. Next slide, please. So this lays out the basic money involved. So I guess one thing to note is that the project is under a certain category of the DOE grant. If for those folks on the call that are perhaps working on grant applications right now, you're probably aware that there's different topic areas. This is what's called topic area 2, and it's for community scale energy generation. And that topic at the time had a $1 million cap, and now has a $2 million cap on the grant amount. So this is basically the tribe and SIA, the housing authority, together wanted to do as much as they could with this first project. So they sought a $1 million grant for a project that was a little bit over $2 million in size. So it worked out well for the cost share requirement. But then we thought, we got to make this cost effective. How we make cost effective with this non-federal cost share requirement, and then the next slide might help us think that through. This next slide, please. So, there's different ways of meeting cost shares. Some tribes are located in states that at certain times have great programs to help meet cost share on energy efficiency or renewable energy projects. That really wasn't the case here. There was actually kind of a fleeting state program for assistance on these projects, but it was one of those things where we hoped we could get it, but it was going so quickly, we thought it might be gone by the time the project got going, and that's what happened. So another way of helping meet cost share was to bring a tax investor in. That's someone who can, use the tax credits available for solar because they meet the proper category. They have to be a taxable entity, and they also have to be a certain type. Corporations can do it typically, or it's called a C Corp, a C corporation, and then other entities that are active in solar or have passive income can do it. So we were able to identify the right kind of investor to help with the project, and it was a good situation for both entities. Because of the depreciation the investor receives, as well as because they were a related entity to the installer, they were willing to share the full value of the tax credit with SIA and the tribe, which was really helpful to make the project work. And that was in value about a third, it's about the equivalent of a $600,000 grant. So that plus the $1 million DOE grant made the project cost effective and had a relatively quick payback because of that. But then we were again thinking about how do we, if we can we cover this remaining $400,000 without to pay the investor back without using tribal funds or housing authority funds, and that's when we focused on the TSAF program, that Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund program. Next slide, please. So this is basically a slide about the TSAF program. It was made available through funding from the Wells Fargo Foundation, and that money was then administered by Grid Alternatives. And Grid Alternatives is involved in this project, but they have like a complex wall set up so that the folks working on their projects can't be involved in the decision making on grants. So, and this was one of the first applications put in. Actually, I think it was before Grid was actually the administrator, so they were involved in the decision. Basically what happened is that TA, we were thinking, how can we pay? And then Tim Horan got a notice about this TSAF fund that was being set up, and we started talking about it. And we decided, SIA decided they should apply for it, and so we had immediate contact made then to Wells Fargo and worked it, and they didn't have their application. At that time it was so early, they didn't have an application form. We had a call, they said what kind of information they needed on the project, and we put it together immediately and got it in. And fortunately, SIA received a grant essentially from this TSAF fund. And it was helpful for both the $400,000 as well as kind of making sure there was enough money to pay Sovereign Power, which is a tribal entity that Tim Welling mentioned, to operate and maintain the facilities going forward for the next 6 years, basically. So that TSAF funding was then used to pay through this power purchase agreement, which I'll talk about in a little bit, to pay off the amount due under that, as well as there's basically a buyout of the investor from the LLC, and I'll talk about that in a second too. The funds were used for both things. Next slide, please. So this just shows the basic structure setup. Not all investment tax credit projects are done this way necessarily, but the way it was structured for this one was that there was a LLC, a limited liability company, set up to allow basically the investor and SIA and the tribe to partner together. So it's actually, this obviously is a webinar about partnerships. This is actually an actual legal partnership that was set up between those entities so we could monetize the tax credit and get that value to SIA and the tribe to drive down the cost of the project. And so the way it's set up is that there's an LLC formed, and there's basically 3 members in this case. A lot of times there's just 2 if there's only one tribal entity, but there's 3 here because you have SIA and the tribe, and then you have the investor involved. And what happened is that that SIA then contributes the money from the grant to the LLC through the reimbursement program they have, and then the investor contributes the remaining money. And then it then is able to, because once the project's built, receive the tax credit amount, which again is about $600,000 on this project. And then it agrees to share the tax credit with the value of the tax credit with SIA and the tribe. And I'll talk to you about how that works in a couple slides later. And then there's also a power purchase agreement that's established between the LLC and SIA and the tribe, which needs to be set up to show that this is operated as basically a business for purposes of the tax code. So the tax code that recognizes that the system's actually owned by the investor and SIA and the tribe in the LLC, and the tax credit can be received. And then we had a provision for prepayment of the PPA amount using the TSAF funding. So that money was all used to prepay for the first basically 5 years, which is the amount of time it takes for the investor to have to be involved in the project before it can leave and not have the tax credit diminished in amount. So that allowed for taking care of all the kind of responsibility for the prepayment of the PPA that the TSAF funding did. Next slide, please. Now I'm just going to go over just quickly some of the agreements that were involved, just so you kind of know how those work on this project. So you can see what needs to be put together to make a project like this work from a legal perspective. Next slide, please. So there's one agreement basically between the tribe and CEHA and the investor, which is called the LLC operating agreement. So the LLC is formed, and then there's an operating agreement that's prepared for that, which is actually an agreement between the tribe and CEHA on one hand and the investor on the other. And it sets forth kind of the rules of the partnership or relationship between the entities. It again sets forth the capital contributions by the tribe, the CEHA, and the investor, which are, the tribe and CEHA are contributing the grant, and the investor is contributing its own money to the project. And then it goes through how the LLC will be involved in construction and operation and maintenance of the facility. It sets forth, kind of when the payments will be made under the construction agreement, which is based on, milestones being met. And then it, covers the operation and maintenance of the facility. The LLC is responsible for that. It then also sets forth what they call cash flows, for the investor and the tribe, which really gets into the issue of, as money comes into the LLC, where does that money go? And the way it's set up is that the investor is paid with the initial money coming through, which is the money from the TSAP fund in this case, under the PPA. But once that money comes in, they're cut off. Then the tribe owes no more. Then any more money coming to the LLC, which would typically be from the tribe or CEHA, would actually flow back to them because they have a capital account, which is $1 million account because they've put the grant money in. So it basically allows for to set the rules up so the investor gets back the amount, its net contribution, the amount of money put in minus the tax credit, but it doesn't get any more, basically. And then it also sets forth, the rights for the investor to sell its interest back to the tribe and CEHA, or for the tribe and CEHA to purchase the investor's interest. One thing I should note too is that actually the investor, the amount of money paid by TSAF into the investor under the PPA is actually less than its net investment, meaning less than basically a little bit over $1 million minus the tax credit value, because we're holding back some money that is then paid to the investor when it agrees to leave, or it leaves the entity. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. So next slide, please. And actually, maybe I don't want to slide in that, so I'll just talk about that now. Sorry. The way it can be set up under the IRS rules is that the investor can have the option of leaving and get 5% of its money it's put in or so at that time. So it's about $50,000 to have them leave the LLC after 5 years. But we also have backup rights by the tribe and the CEHA in case that's not exercised, to make sure that the tribe and CEHA get the LLC, control the LLC and the solar facility. And then one more thing that stands out to me is that because this system is actually owned by an LLC that has an investor involved in it, we need to have a lease or other access permit or agreement to have the IRS recognize that the facility is actually owned by that LLC and not just by the tribe or CEHA directly. And that then triggers what's required if it's on reservation land, especially on trust land, it triggers what's required for BIA review. And BIA has special leasing regulations. They have leasing regulations that are actually for wind and solar projects, and they can be helpful for projects. But that still requires BIA approval unless the tribe has a Hearth Act ordinance, which allows them to do it themselves. But there's another way around this for projects like this where we have a quick payback, and I'll get to that the next slide. Next slide, please. And then, so there's, in terms of, getting the ownership documented through a lease or other access agreement, there's the option also of doing an access permit. And an access permit, the good thing about it is that you don't need BIA approval. The issue with it is you have to be careful not to make sure it's not a lease. And so it can't grant a legal interest in the land. It has to be short term. It has to be non-possessory right of access. So you can't exclude others if you have access that way. It has to be revocable at any time. But fortunately, we're able to put together permits that do just that for these kind of projects because the investor is planning to leave so early, or the plan is for them to leave so early. So we can have a very short period of time, and they're given access not to be able to exclude others, but just to have the solar facilities on the reservation. And then if you do that, you just have to submit a letter to BIA saying that we have a permit, and here it is basically. and then allow BI 10 days to determine if it wants to that it's a lease, and you need approval as a lease. But they don't do that if it's a true permit, because that's, it's a short-term item that doesn't require BI approval then. So that's how we handle the access issue. Next slide, please. Another key document then is, you have to have some kind of agreement to build the system. For a project like this, it's a $2 million project. You want to make sure you have a good contract for the benefit of the tribe or housing authority or other tribal entity. This is actually an agreement between the LLC and the installer, but it really still matters a lot to the tribe, and in this case, SIA, for example, the housing authority, because they're the ones that are ultimately get the project, and we want to ensure all the warranties flow through to them and things like that. So it's a key issue, making sure it's the proper documentation of this, of any kind of agreement. And it allows you then to also make sure you're meeting your federal procurement requirements in terms of the provisions in the contracts, and can address issues like make sure you have good warranties and making sure that you have appropriate employment training if you have tribal members involved, things like that, to get everything addressed in this agreement in terms of the building, the facility. Next slide, please. Then I mentioned the power purchase agreement before. That's the agreement between the LLC and the users of the energy. In this case, there were two PPAs, because you had one with the tribe and one with SIA. And again, we used though the TSAF funds to prepay that, so that's all taken care of. The payments due under that, and the only thing that remains now is the buyout after 5 years, using TSAF funds as well. And that's basically money that's held in escrow that will be delivered upon the completion of the 5 years and the notice from the investor. Next slide, please. And last agreement that kind of is important, or your set of agreements are important, are you have an interconnection agreement, which I think Tim mentioned before, connecting to the grid, meeting the utility requirements. And then another key concept in agreement is the net metering agreement, which in this case is beneficial. So it allows, the solar produces only when the sun's out. A lot of these buildings use more energy perhaps at night or other times, but we get full, or SIA and the tribe get full retail credit for all the energy produced, regardless of when it's used and whether it's used actually by the building or not. And I think that's, next slide, please. These are just some, more photos. If you just kind of flip through these, you show the administration building for the tribe, housing, one of the housing buildings. Next slide. The fish hatchery, which is a very large system because it uses a lot of energy. And then the last slide is the senior housing. So it just shows, some of the numerous buildings addressed. And then the next project for SIA is 140 homes actually covered with the DOE grant and the tax credit investment. So a similar structure. And with this, I think it goes over to Clyde.
All right, good morning. This is Clyde Abrahamson with the Spokane Indian Housing Authority, and I'd like to thank John Clancy for a very nice and thorough job of covering all the legal aspects of putting a project together. A lot of these things are put together behind the scenes. A lot of people don't see what's taking place legally and how it's all put together. A lot of structure there, putting together the power purchase agreements and so forth. So I appreciate that, John. And also I want to thank Tim Willink, because there's a lot of logistics of putting together the construction team and purchasing all the equipment and getting that here in a timely manner. So a project like this can work effectively and efficiently like it did a year ago. Today it's nice and sunny, and so we're getting the full benefit. I think it's going to be close to 98 degrees here. So the solar panels are producing energy at full capacity today. So a lot of the residences and all the buildings are benefiting from a project like this. And I really appreciate Jana Gagnon's presentation. Their Blue Lake Rancheria is in a position where we would like to be in the future. So we're continuing to build our capacity here with this project and projects in the near future. So this project that we have currently, we're going to build a project here in the near future, renewable energy projects at tribal housing. So repath, or we're rethinking how we're structuring these projects, and mainly for disadvantaged tribal members, ones who have a high energy burden, especially in the wintertime. In the wintertime, our temperatures average probably right at freezing from January, from 1st of November until the end of February. And so the temperatures are extreme here in this area, in this part of Washington, in Northeast Washington. Let's go to the next slide, please. We're going to be talking about, first of all, identifying your preferred technology. And in our case, it's solar. Some others, it could be a wind or another type of energy resource. And also we'll talk about developing a plan your project's specifics, your locations, what units you want to provide energy to, and who are you focused on helping. That'll help you create your partnership on how you're going to help them and who is going to be on in your partnership to help these individuals. And another key point that John had connected on is financing your project and the key resources. And John hit that very well. Next slide, please. And then the other thing that also John hit on is, additional funding strategies, not only for this project, but you've got to think ahead into the future projects. Where are you going to, what is your next project going to look like? Is it you're going to get state and tribal funding? And also the philanthropic part of it, where is that funding going to come from? What are your resources? And again, Wells Fargo, Grid Alternatives, Microsoft, and we're going to talk about a few others that are available in Washington State, but depending upon the state you're in California or in Oklahoma or some part of the Midwest, they have finances available through different organizations that could help out your project, including within your own tribe. So future projects, want to plan your current projects with the idea that there will be more to come, and be optimistic, plan big. And that's what we did. And so we can plan it for the future and have the idea of our next project in mind. Next slide, please. So here we identified our preferred technology as solar power, and it was preferred for the tribal housing on the Spokane Indian Reservation for the Spokane Tribe. The reason is we have a high energy burden because of the extreme cold temperatures in the winter. We're not as cold as Alaska. They probably think we're a bunch of wimps down here, but it's a nice climate in our area. And today, as I mentioned earlier, we have the other extreme. We're going to, in some parts of Washington, we're going to reach 100, and I think in southeast Washington, it'll be, I think they're going to reach 110 degrees, which is rarity. So we can see how this energy is helping out in different parts of the country, not only in our part of the country. And also why we preferred solar is because Spokane is actually, another meaning for Spokane and the Spokane Tribe is children of the sun. So our first project here, we called it the Children of the Sun Solar Initiative. And so I think the tribe was already, ready for solar, being the children of the sun. Next slide, please. So to help you develop your plan or your project, you want to get into a lot of the specifics on your project, the size of the project. the number of homes, the communities that will be involved. And I believe on our Cozy One project, our first project, we involved 3 different communities. On the west side, it was in the Ford area, and Martha Boardman in Wellpennant, where we had the senior housing, the admin building, and also on the west side of the reservation, where we included the West End Community Center. Your project partners also got to be adaptable. During the middle of this project, or just before it got started, we had to eliminate one of the buildings because the roof structure wasn't new enough. It had an old roofing on it, so we were planning to remove the roof and put a new roof on before this project, but that all fell apart. So we had to choose a couple of other buildings, and fortunately we were able to include these buildings into the project. So you may, when you're putting a project together, you may want to also have like a backup building or 2 that you're going to install solar on, if that's the direction you're going to go. A lot of individuals will go ground mount or community solar. Our next project, we're going to have 140 homes total, and we're planning on 70 roof mounts and 70 ground mounts. And the reason for that is the orientation of the roofs. Are one of the slopes, are they south facing, and is there enough room to put the needed solar panels on those south facing slopes? And the ground mounts are so you can position them somewhere around the home, and so that they will be, again, south sloping. Next slide, please. Financing your project and finding your key sources, it's very important on this. So fortunately, the DOE energy grant, shout out to the DOE partners, to Lizana and her team, and they were actually really good to work with. They really are there to help you with your project. They're not there to hinder or look over your shoulder, but they're there to help you. They want your project to succeed, and so they were helpful to us when we come across something that we're not familiar with. They helped us get through it, as well as the rest of the team. John Clancy and Tim Willink, they've all been there, they've done that, they've come across these problems. So it's important to have a team that is that has that experience that you'll need to call on from time to time. So you want to prepare in advance of your project to the due date. Hopefully everyone who is planning to submit an application are well ahead of the game. And you want to be ahead of this before submitting your grant, because this will help you with the quality of your project. And you want a good quality project that's well thought out, and having good partners will help you. And you also want to include all the costs related to the project. You want to look at certain fees that you may not be thinking about. Are there some installation fees, or is there any fees that are related to the interconnection with your utility company? One of the things that we didn't have with this project is the salary of individuals who are working on this project. And because you're going to put some time in there, how are you going to pay for your time and the staff's time to help administer this project and put your team together? Another important team member is your tax credit investor, and Sunvest Solar out of Wisconsin, they were a good partner. So we're hoping to partner with them again. So you want to choose a good partner that you're familiar with or others are familiar with. So choose someone who has a good relationship, that work maybe with other tribes, because some organizations, they may have a difficulty working with a tribe or who had a bad experience with a tribe, but all tribes are not the same. And maybe you want to ask your investor who have they worked with in the past, and kind of like interview those individuals. How did it work out? How did they help you out with your project? Was there any snags that you came along with the project? And so I'll have a conversation with key employments of the investment company, and maybe ask them, well, do you have any concerns about our organization? And so you have that open line of communication between yourself and between the tax credit investor or any one of your partners. I really liked what Jana said, to create a partnership with your utilities department, because get to know those individuals, and so that they too can be a partner in this project. Next slide, please. So looking at further at additional funding strategies, where will you find the additional funding sources for the remaining 25% of your project? So 50% of your project usually comes from the Department of Energy, and about 25% will come from your tax credit investor. Where are you going to get this additional funding? And fortunately, on our first project, as John and Tim both mentioned, Wells Fargo and Grid Alternatives, the Solar Accelerator Fund, helped our project, which actually gave us the immediate benefits of this solar project. Usually, you don't get the immediate benefits because you're paying back the tax credit investor, but fortunately, we had good timing on this project, and so we were able to fall into this category with the help of Wells Fargo Grid Alternatives for this Solar Accelerated Fund. So you may even want to look into the Washington State solar deployment grant, but I don't think you can couple it with a DOE grant, because I think that whatever state, Washington State, I know they get their funding through DOE also, so it would have to be a separate project. But the philanthropic ways to get that funding, you may want to talk to other individuals. We've talked with Sparks Northwest, and they are in touch with other solar installers, so they may be able to help you find this additional funding to cover that gap funding of the 25%. One of the areas that you could is increased rents on the units, and that would be a percentage of what the customers are saving on their utility bills, and that may be one direction to go to help fund this project over the 5 or 6 years, however you set up the project for paying back your tax credit investor. In our final slide here, let's look a little more at the philanthropic part of it. We were fortunate that Microsoft helped with part of our project, but it was a small part of it. Again, I mentioned Sparks Northwest. They're helping us with actually with a microgrid study on a separate project, but they are in touch with other funding sources. And there's Solar Energy Technologies Office and Trans-Atlanta that will help you. I just threw up an example of what it would cost an individual on an average size home, say it's a 3-bedroom home, 6 kilowatt, and the final cost of installation in our area would be about 25,000. Maybe a little bit bigger home, 8 kilowatt total project, that would cost a little bit more, about 29,000. That would be in this area, but there's solar calculators out there and that you could use to see how you would how much your project would cost, and all of this would help you to determine how big of a project, how many homes or buildings. But mostly you have to go back and look at your utility bills on each of these units for an entire year, and this will tell you how large of a solar installation that you will need on your building. And that's the beginning of the project. But this part of this presentation is building partnerships, and I believe that we were successful in building a partnership with Godfrey and Kahn, John Clancy, Grid Alternative, and also Sovereign Power, Jason Campbell. He helped us put all of this together. So build a partnership with individuals who have been there, they've done that, and they've gone through all of the issues in the past, and they will help you to build a successful project. And that's all I have. So back to you, Tommy.
Great, thank you very much. And we will continue on to the next presentation. Thank you.
Dr. Jones, this is Sonny. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
How you doing?
All good.
Okay, so Dr. Hirsch and I will be giving the presentation to talk about how to create partnerships to advance tribal energy projects today. When I first let me say that I'm filling in for Terrell today. His mother passed away, so he can't be here today. So Brian and I are going to fill in for him while he attends his mother's funeral today. When I first got the email about tribal members and how we create partnerships, I was a little confused. And the reason I say that is because most NANA shareholders are tribal members. Most tribal members are NANA shareholders. So I had to really think about, all the different ways that NANA partners and talks about different issues for the NANA region. For example, we talk to our tribes on a consistent basis about land issues, gravel issues, energy issues, and we also talk to them about our trespass program. We monitor the caribou migration through Northwest Alaska, and to try to ensure that out-of-state hunters are not coming into our region, affecting the migration path of the caribou. So next slide, please. So on December 18th, 1971, President Nixon signed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, settling the land claims issue by transferring land titles to 12 Alaska Native corporations and over 200 local village corporations. Alaska Natives received compensation in order of approximately $962 million and fee simple title to 44 million acres of surface subsurface estate. That equaled 1/10 of Alaska. So you can see from the slide here that NANA was entitled to 2.2 million acres and $44 million in cash. Next slide, please. So here's a map of the NANA region. It's about 36,000 square miles. We have 11 tribes, and we've got various wind projects, solar projects. We're starting to install heat pumps throughout the region. But one thing that that I did want to mention on this slide, and I left out a slide that I was given yesterday, and it didn't make it into the slide deck. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Red Dog mine. It's the second largest zinc producing mine in the world. And, you know, when we start talking about our tribes and what it is that we do for our tribes, you know, as a native corporation, we do a lot. I mean, we do resource projects to try to employ our tribal members, but we also create revenues. And through Red Dog, under Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, 70% of the revenues that come out of the Red Dog mine, the zinc mine, has to be shared with the other 11 native corporations. And through 2019, those contributions have equaled $1.4 billion. So just keep that in mind that, you know, Alaska Native Corporation, like NANA, does a lot for our tribal members, but even the tribal members outside of our region, because that money flows from the native corporations under ANSCA down through 7J, and it has to go to the 200 village corporations. So keep in mind, NANA only keeps 30% of the revenues coming from Red Dog. And in fiscal years FY15 through FY18, 70% of the 7I monies came from Red Dog. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that, you know, NANA's a little different. All the 11 villages, the 10 villages merged with NANA, except for Kotzebue, they have their own village corporation. And so by that, you know, we're required to work with our tribes, to partner with our tribes, to bring opportunities to our tribes. We do scholarships. We help with the funerals. We create jobs. There's a number of different things that this native corporation, NANA, does for our tribal members.
Excuse me. Yeah, this is Brian Hirsch. I would just add to what Sonny's saying here, especially for folks from the lower 48 here. A way to kind of understand this is that, as mentioned previously, there are 12 regions that were broken out in Alaska, and then this is one of those regions. Every one of these communities that you see here, Kobuk, Shungnak, Ambler, Kivalina, etc., they all have both a federally recognized tribal government, as well as originally under the Land Claims Act, they had a village corporation that received some land, and then NANA, the regional corporation, also received land. And there's a lot of complications there, but the upshot is that all of these communities from the village corporation side agreed to merge their land, except for Kotzebue, and merge their structures under NANA. That is pretty rare and unique within Alaska, but the upshot of that is that this is really the original core partnership that we're talking about that has contributed to NANA's success. And so in a lot of places, there's some conflict. There's a city government, there's a tribal government, there's a village corporation, and there's a regional corporation. In this area, the communities really decided to merge, and that they are much better off working together. There are some exceptions, etc., but that's kind of an important underlying understanding here for a lot of the success and partnership development, and also the protocol that Sonny was mentioning in terms of NANA is very respectful, and on one hand, it's their land. On the other hand, they don't do anything without getting explicit approval and permission from the community that is essentially the tribal government. That's all I have. Thank you on that slide.
Thank you, Brian. Next slide, please. So just to, you know, you've heard this presentation before, there are no roads connecting our communities with our region. And so transportation of materials, equipment to do our projects within the region is very expensive. It's 61% more expensive to live in our region than it is to live here in Anchorage. We have a very high cost of goods and fuel, and so I'm going to go over that here in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So, this is Nana's energy vision. It's the same energy vision as the Northwest Arctic Borough. We have the same boundaries. This is to reduce diesel consumption within our region is getting more important. And I say that because when the pandemic hit, you've seen the lower 48 fuel prices drop considerably. I mean, down to $1 in some places. And so, but within our region of Alaska, our part of the world, we were locked in at those high energy costs, those high fuel prices. We did not see any type of relief as the rest of the country did. And so I really want to emphasize that. Now, the fuel barge is now arriving into our region, and it's coming with a new fuel price. But we're not going to see that new fuel price. We're going to see a blended price from last year. And so we're still going to see high energy costs for our region. But, because of our partnerships with the tribe, with the DOE, with Deerstone Consultant, Northwest Arctic Borough, we're starting to meet our target goals. We're starting to reduce diesel consumption. Next slide, please. So these are our fuel prices for 2019. Right now, Ingomar is working on the 2020 prices, and like I said earlier, those prices are most likely going to drop. That's what we're hoping for. Anything in red was a price increase. Anything in green was a reduction in price. Anything in black, it stayed the same. And so I want to talk a little bit about our electrical rates, which is on the right-hand columns there. You can see what the electrical rates for each of our villages. In the kilowatt hours 1 through 500 PCE, that's our PCE rate if you stay under 500 kilowatts per month. But if you go over that 500 kilowatt hours, then you start to see these higher rates. The problem that we have within our region is that in our villages, you're getting overcrowding in the homes, which means you have a lot of people taking showers, washing clothes, leaving the lights on, watching TV, playing games, and those bills can get really high in some of our villages. And I can tell you that there's going to be a reduction in power cost equalization, the state subsidy, by 1.5%. And that took an effect in May 8th. That's going to have an impact on some of our community, because I can tell you right now, based on the utility delinquency rate, some of our villages are struggling already. And to see a reduction in that state subsidy is going to be a huge challenge this winter. And it's going to get even worse next year because the state is facing a $300 million deficit because of the drop in oil prices. And so we're trying to get ahead of this, trying to figure out what it is that we're going to do to help out our villages. Next slide, please. So I wanted to make sure that I shared some of the impacts of COVID-19 on our region. As with all the other states, we're seeing an uptick in numbers, especially here in Anchorage. It seems like we're getting 100, 150 per day. But now what's happening is that COVID is starting to hit our rural villages. I think we have like 19 in the Nana region now, and it's spreading. Part of the problem that we have here is we don't have the facilities, we don't have the expertise or the resources, to deal with this type of disease. And I know our regional entities are working hard to minimize the impact and to keep it contained. But it is having an impact. We don't get the flights that we used to. Alaska Airlines used to fly into our region at least once a day. Now it's every other day, and I don't even think they get planes on weekends anymore. And so there's different businesses throughout our regions that have, closed. I know one of the airlines within our region has stopped, so there's fewer jobs. And with fewer planes, we're starting to see higher food prices. And I haven't been home in a while because of the travel restrictions, but our food prices are rising. This picture here is not from Kotzebue, but it is from Bethel. So you can see that this is happening throughout rural Alaska and not just our region. So it's giving us an increased sense of urgency that, we have to do something about energy security and food security. Now, we all know you need water to fight COVID, right? And so energy becomes a huge issue for us, because you need energy to heat water, to treat water, to pump water. And you also need energy to keep the heat trace on for these homes, to keep the water and sewer running. So those are some of the things that I'm hoping that people take with them on some of the challenges that we are having because of the COVID-19. Next slide, please. So I think part of the reason that we're so successful in developing partnerships with our tribes is because of the partnership that we have with Department of Energy, some of the stuff that we've worked on in the past. We've done our strategic energy plan working with our tribes. We did the wind resource assessment, the geothermal assessment. Now we're in the mode of where we're trying to execute these projects. I think back then in 2008, when we started these programs with DOE, we really didn't know what it is that we were going to do. And when we finally decided what we wanted to do, we had to make sure that it didn't impact our subsistence and traditional activities. And so now we're working with the tribes. When we do a project, we don't ever just say, hey, we're going to do it this way, and that's the way it's going to be. We go out there, we talk with our tribes and say, hey, is this something that you want to do? And then we get feedback from them on where we should work on the project. So there's plenty of consultation through these different grants that we received. Next slide, please. So Dr. Hirsch and I, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've developed a relationship with our tribes and trying to figure out what partnerships we should bring to the villages. We vet them out before we even, approach a tribe. We talk to different energy industry contractors. We make sure that whatever technology that we bring into the region is going to be Arctic proven. You can't just put anything you want and put it up in our region. And we get temperatures from 40 to 50 below, and then you got 20, 30 mile an hour winds. You can imagine what type of materials you're going to need to have a robust system within our region. But when we work with our tribes, when we develop those partnerships, these are the different activities that we work on together. We do project development, grant writing. We advocate for change in state and federal policies. Infrastructure planning, that's a huge one that we need to work on in the future, because some of the switchgear within our villages is 20 to 40 years old. And so in order to integrate renewables into a village, you have to do the upgrades for the new microgrid. We continue to communicate with all the regional and other entities. We update our energy plan with the Northwest Arctic Bureau. And like I said, we research Arctic appropriate technology. And one way that we're trying to regionalize some of our services, like bulk fuel purchasing, and do workforce development, renewable energy training, build transmission lines, is trying to build a regional energy authority / joint action agency. And that's something that we're working on, have been working on for the past 2 years now. One thing that's really a concept that we really push forward, you all know that we harvest berries, we hunt caribou, we fish. We do that seasonally, right? And so we're trying to let people know that we need to make a transition to renewables, and we could harvest the sun for 6 to 8 months out of the year. We could harvest wind energy year round. And if we're really going to have an impact on the high cost of energy, these are some of the things that we need to do. And so, for the most part, people are coming on board and they're saying, hey, they're seeing what we did with Deering, Buckland, and Kotzebue, and they're saying we want what they have as well, and they're willing to learn more about it. So seasonal harvesting of renewable energy is something that's becoming a priority. Next slide, please. So I'll start talking about this grant because I think this is one of the most important grants that DOE Office of Indian Energy has ever come out with, and it's been hugely impactful for our region for several reasons. It forced us to continue on with our Energy Steering Committee meetings. And so our tribal members, our regional entities, energy industry, Department of Energy, USDA, all these different players come in and meet in Kotzebue to discuss some of the issues that we're having and some of the solutions that we could bring forward. But we also talk about bulk fuel purchasing and the high cost of fuel for each village. And why is it when you have a fuel barge that goes into one village, they're paying 3 different prices for that same fuel on that barge. And we're like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. And we also learned that if you start buying fuel in January instead of May, you could save a lot of money. And so this 3-year effort, this money that DOE has provided to do this intertribal work has been huge for us, because it's allowed us to bring different technologies within our region to reduce the cost of energy. But it also brings us credibility, because you have people like Givy coming in all the time, and participating in the meeting. And you got people like Dr. Hirsch, who make sure that we have the right type of equipment that we're using within the region. And we bring in partners like ABB, Box Power, all these different energy industry people participating and coming up with the right type of solution. And it requires regional coordination. So we work closely with the borough to make this happen. And when we generate this information, we just don't keep it to ourselves. We invite other regions like the Bering Straits. We invited Calista to come participate to learn what it is that we're doing. So it's been hugely effective. One of the main things that it does for our tribal members is it builds local capacity and their understanding of renewable energy. Now, we all know that we can't promote economic development with high energy costs. It's virtually impossible. Our tribal members don't have discretionary income to promote economic development. I mean, they're having to make hard choices between putting food on the table, heating their home, paying their electric bill, or paying their water and sewer bill. Now, that water and sewer is going to become extremely important because of COVID. And so that's something that we have to take in mind at the next ESC. I'm sure that's going to be a topic. Next slide, please.
Yeah, Sonny, if I could add something here, I would just offer that this Energy Steering Committee concept can't really be overemphasized, especially in small, rural, remote places. If you are, say, a large energy company, like, for example, ABB, a big power electronics company that we've been using for a lot of our microgrid work and renewable energy. As a big company, if you just see one tiny little village way out in remote Alaska, it's not very interesting to you. If all of a sudden you see 11 villages with a regional corporation backing, as well as the borough or local county government, essentially the equivalent thereof, as well as a lot of other players involved, suddenly this becomes a much more interesting and potentially profitable project for you. So what we've really done is try to aggregate and basically look bigger and share the information so that what we do learn in one community can extend to the other community. We can reduce costs, we can buy in larger bulk, etc. So really this concept of aggregating has really resulted in the partnerships and the interest in the bigger industries. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize one of the things that we do under that same grant is we travel out to the villages and we meet with tribal members. One is to update them on the different technologies that we're working on. We worked with Deering, Buckland, and Kotzebue. Those are the first villages that we worked with because those are the non-AVEC villages. They were wanting to do something, so we started off with wind and solar and batteries and controls. And so now that we've developed a track record, we have a roadmap, we could start moving into the AVEC villages and partnering up with AVEC and trying to make this happen for the rest of the remaining villages. So now I want to talk a little bit about our Department of Energy solar grant. When we first started talking about solar energy for our region, I think that was back in 2008, 2009, we really didn't know what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. I think the first thought was, oh, let's do solar panels. Let's do residential for our villages. And, you know, that wasn't really a good idea, because we started thinking, oh man, if there's problems with their toaster, they're going to turn around and say, hey, it was because of the solar panels. And going out there and fixing one issue at a time on several different households, when you don't have the expertise to solve problems like that, wasn't really going to be a solution. So we started, you know, at the time Pilar was on board with Office of Indian Energy, and she started talking about community solar arrays. And we started thinking, what would that look like for our region? And so we continued the conversation. And I remember Gibby and I talking back in 2014, 2015, and Gibby said, well, let's have a meeting. So we set up a meeting here. It was a solar energy conference. We invited people from our region, energy industry, and different organizations. I think we had a few people from the state participate. And we said, well, what if we did community solar arrays for some of our villages? And let's start with these villages that want the project. So we started off with Buckland and Kotzebue, and I think Brad Reeves was there, and he goes, hey, we should throw in Deering too. And so we put this concept together, not knowing what it was going to look like, but we had an idea of what we wanted to do. And so we put in the DOE application, and we were awarded $1 million to install community solar arrays in Deering, Buckland, and Kotzebue. Now, the challenge was that we had to come up with a cost share. And so Deering and Buckland decided to use their NANA VEDC monies, that's the Village Economic Development Committee monies, as their cost share. And so we had to approach KEA, Kotzebue Electric Association, and, you know, they chose to get VIF monies, Village Improvement Funds, from the Northwest Arctic Borough. The first two villages that we started off with were Deering and Buckland. Those two solar arrays are now operational. Kotzebue recently built their solar array. It's a 567 kilowatt system. It's the second largest solar array in rural Alaska. The system sizes for Deering and Buckland are 50 kW each. And in order to really bring, you know, these partnerships, we had to talk with the tribe. We had to go out there and meet with them and say, this is what it's going to do. And we have to be very careful when we're giving expectations or telling the tribe what it is. I said, you know, we said that when we brought in wind energy, that it would stabilize the cost. But if you brought in solar and batteries and controls, there's an opportunity to do some real savings for the villages. And so, you know, they were on board. They were willing to be the guinea pig and give this a shot and see if it would work. And so, you know, Dr. Hirsch, Deerstone Consulting, came on board, and he was a big influence on how these things would be brought about. We brought in Box Power for Deering and Buckland, and then KEA pretty much did their own project. They brought in Alaska Native Renewable Industries, which is a contractor out of Hughes, Alaska. And so this is how we bring partnerships to the tribes. You know, we vet them out through Deerstone Consulting. We talk to DOE. We talk to all these different players at the Energy Steering Committee meeting. But I think what was really helpful too is when Department of Energy would host these different energy conference or these meetings in Denver, that gave us a chance to network in person, to talk about these different types of concepts and how we bring them forward and how to get them done. Next slide, please. So here's some pictures of our Buckland Community Solar Array. We work with Box Power. This is the Connex design. It's rated for 145 miles per hour. It's at a 45-degree angle. What you can't see here is a Connex being buried, filled with rock, and then the Box Power Connex was attached to the one that's buried through corner locks, and then they welded it together. The neat thing about this type of project is we maximize local hire for the village. And I can tell you, people from the tribe, from the city, all these different employees get involved, but and people that haven't worked for a while come in and participate. So this system's up and running. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to collect data, performance data, and the system there is still running in manual. We need ABB to come in and do final commissioning, and so that's something that we're working on here in the next couple of months. Brian, you have anything you want to add about Buckland?
I would just say it was the first large-scale solar project that's really owned by the utility and plugged back into the grid for everybody's benefit. And there was a city component who owns a utility. There was a tribal component. The tribe has been both very supportive. And for example, when there was some additional technical assistance needed, the tribe was the entity that applied to DOE's Office of Indian Energy to get approval for ongoing technical assistance that was then shared with and relayed to the city. So kind of the next level is really the local partnerships and cooperation that this project benefited from.
Thank you, Brian. And the neat thing about this thing with having locals participate in the construction, they'll know how to repair it if something should happen to the solar panels.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about the Deering solar array. You know, pretty much it was the same box power design, but we did a little differently. We did not bury the connex and add rocks. So at this time, what the tribal members did is they took super sacks and filled them up with gravel and then set the sacks on the inside of the connex. And so it still had, you know, we still were able to meet some of the requirements for wind. Deering has a lot more wind than Buckland, so we had to take that into consideration as well. It's 50 kW, and like Buckland, I mean, we hired locals and we worked with the tribe. I think we rented some of the tribal equipment in Deering. I think people were really wanting to get involved. They helped build the foundation, and they also hauled the gravel. So it was a really good learning experience for everybody. Next slide, please. So this project right here was hugely important. This was funding that we received from USDA, and that was to install energy storage batteries and controls for Deering and Buckland. You know, we received $1.6 million to get this job done. You know, we worked with Dr. Hirsch, and we selected ABB as our contractor for the control system, and we selected SAF for the battery provider. And so there's different people that we worked with. You know, with the tribe's permission, we worked with IES, ABB, SAF, KEA, Deerstone, and the Northwest Arctic Borough for system integration. So this actually created our microgrid for Deering and Buckland. It allows for high penetration renewables to turn the diesels off when there's enough renewable energy available. It also controls the electric boiler for additional diesel displacement. Next slide, please. So because of this microgrid that we were able to build in Deering and Buckland, it's the first and second utility scale wind solar battery diesel hybrid system in rural Alaska. The biggest thing, the most important thing I think that we've achieved since 2008 is we were able to hit diesel off operation in Buckland on July 24, 2019, and diesel off operation in Deering on October 11, 2019. And so now, seeing that we can achieve this in the summer, it gives us confidence, and it gives us a track record. But it also enables us to start working with AVEC on these other villages, because they've seen what we're able to do with the partnerships with DOE and Deerstone, and so we recently received funding from USDA to put solar and batteries in Shungnak, and we all know that Shungnak and Kobuk are intertied, so this is going to help two villages instead of one. We hope to start that project with AVEC and the Northwest Arctic Borough next year.
I would add to that that success breeds success, and these two projects have really they've gotten a bunch of attention. They've provided confidence for everybody that the technology works, that the communities can manage and be in the lead on this. And so AVEC, for those who don't know, is Alaska Village Electric Cooperative. It's the largest rural cooperative in Alaska. They have 56 or 58 villages now, and several of them, 8 in particular, are located within the NANA region, Northwest Arctic Borough. And so AVEC has kind of been a little bit, arm's length, watching us and seeing how we're doing. And the result now is that they're interested in working much closer with us. And so we're talking about power purchase agreements. We're talking about joint fundraising for power plant needs, such as diesel generator upgrades, switch gear upgrades, as well as, of course, the renewable side. So it's really opened up a whole new area that is both hopefully going to benefit the NANA region and really statewide across Alaska, some close partnerships with the utilities, which, as we all know, I think sometimes that's a real challenge. And so this success and DOE support, I think AVEC sees, okay, well, this is good enough for DOE, this is good enough for us too. And AVEC has also been a DOE grant recipient. So we're all kind of really working together to try to lower energy costs, reduce fuel consumption, and improve quality of life for folks out in very remote, challenging conditions.
So one thing I want to make sure that I think will help DOE and NREL understand is some of the challenges that we're having with this project is the internet system. We need to beef up our internet system within these 2 villages so that, one, we can go and extract the data to look at the performance, but in moving forward, how is it that we can get the data into the cloud so anybody can go in and look and see what's happening with the microgrid? So that's where we're at now, and working with ABB and the Northwest Arctic Borough is how can we start doing follow-up and run, being able to look at the system and show the benefits of these types of microgrids. We still need to address heating diesel engines and powerhouse under the long duration of diesel off operation. That's a work in progress. This microgrid also enables high penetration, high quality renewable generation like wind and solar and energy without destabilizing the system. Next slide, please. So some of our upcoming energy projects, now that we're coming to the closure of Deering, Buckland, and Kotzebue, and we're doing follow-up and run, we want to replicate these projects into the remaining villages of our region. And so we're looking at different funding opportunities. We did put in the application into USDA for NOAATAC. We did not get selected as a finalist. And I think part of the reason is I think we asked for too much money. There's a need for powerhouse upgrades in order to finish the projects, and I think the only way we're going to be able to get that solved is if we combine different funding sources. And so if there's a if there's flexible funding sources that we can mix together, I think we can finish off the rest of the villages. And so that's something that I'm hoping that DOE and USDA look at to get it done. We did, as I mentioned earlier, Shungnak and Kuluk, that project will get started next year. Right now, we're working with Baker Tilly out of Colorado to form a joint action agency. We're looking at what services can we regionalize. Also, how can we support our energy steering committee in the future to keep the relationship with tribes. But also, NANA Regional Corporation is no longer doing energy grants. So we need a structure that's going to be able to take over. And so the Joint Action Agency needs to be formed within the next 6 months in order to take over that role and responsibility. We hope to submit more DOE grant applications for solar and batteries. We're looking at it for NOAATAC. We need to work with AVEC on that, and we'll continue to support all of our other villages in the region. Next slide, please. Lastly, in closing, I just want to say, we couldn't have done this on our own. DOE, Office of Indian Energy, has played a huge role in our success, and working with Deerstone Consulting, Northwest Arctic Bureau, KEA, the villages, the tribes, the state. I think this is the only way to get it done. It's got to be the energy solutions that we bring to the villages has to be a joint effort. And, we need easier grant applications. We need a reduction in cost share. These are the best ways that you could help the tribes succeed in lowering the cost of energy. I think it's hugely important. With that, I just want to say thank you to Office of Indian Energy for all your support over the years. We appreciate it. We look forward to working with you in the near future. Brian, I'll turn it over to you if you have anything you'd like to add.
I would just share your appreciation for DOE and everybody involved. And this has been a very informative webinar. I know we're a little bit late, so I'll keep it very brief. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great presentations from start to finish. We do have a few questions here, and one of which came in when Jana was presenting, and but I do think that it may be answered by others. Do on-site projects require Indian worker requirement to assist in educating Indian workers? So much like affirmative action. If anyone has any comments on that one.
Hey, this is Tim from Grid Alternatives. We work through the Taro office, and I think that's key. Again, it varies by tribe, their requirements on hiring. And, again, it's just to, make sure that eligible applicants who live on Indigenous nations have access to these jobs or workforce development training. Sometimes it's a ratio, for every crew member you have, and maybe or every 2 crew members, you have to look at hiring somebody from the respective nation. So we don't really have an issue with it. We're a training organization, so we bring on people who don't necessarily have construction experience, but maybe looking to build up their resume and get their foot in the door. So we're not a for-profit company that is looking at a certain skill set or a high. We'll take whoever the tribe recommends, and it's part of our work in these areas. So hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. And actually, the next question is for you as well. For PV setup, does that include storage too, or does someone else do that?
Did you say that was for me, Tim, or?
Yes.
No, most of the time we are incorporating more and more storage in our projects. It just depends on the goals of the tribe. And, a lot of it's driven by budget. So if you add storage, then it would add to the cost. But most of the work that we do is just grid tied without storage. And we do some small projects on the Navajo Nation where it's completely off grid. But it just depends on what the tribe's goals are, what the situation is. If we don't have access to electricity, then definitely we'll incorporate storage. If the tribe wants to have backup emergency emergency energy in case of blackouts, or natural disasters or emergencies, then we can incorporate backup energy storage. A lot of times nowadays, like with Jana's project, I think it does both. It helps with demand charges and mitigating costs and selling off reservation, and then also serves as emergency backup storage when they have these rolling blackouts in California. So it's really specific to where we work.
This is Brian. If I could add briefly to that, I would just, what Tim was just saying at the very end there, that it really depends a lot on what the goals are. I mean, if it's really just a cost savings thing, many times it's easier, better, cheaper to just put solar on and you can save some money. If you are looking at things like energy security, like if you're in threat of losing power because of fire or other outages, or in rural Alaska, if you want to have a backup for your diesel generator, then batteries, energy storage are really necessary or essential. So there are a lot of technical issues, there's complications, there's costs that come with batteries. And so it's in part driven by your goals. And so if it's just money, typically batteries aren't the way to go, depending on if you can get subsidies and tax credits and other things. But generally, it's yeah, that's kind of the original decision, and then you go from there.
Thank you. Next question: are tribes using CARES Act funding for solar projects?
Not in our region, they're not.
So we're not hearing a lot on that one. If any of these questions you want to delve deeper in with, you can write the email addresses we have there on the screen as well.
Yeah, this is Tim. I've heard of a tribe in South Carolina that has access CARES Act funding, but not. I think tribes are also looking at this, but I haven't seen anything with our partners implemented it yet.
Okay, we have a question directed to John. Is it a good idea that the LLC remain after the life of the solar project? John, are you there? You might be on mute. Well, we can get that answered for you. You can email these the email addresses here listed on the screen, and for any other direct questions for any of our speakers, please feel free to do so. At this point, there does not appear to be any additional questions. I want to thank all of our presenters again for their time and the excellent presentations. And we're also very interested in your suggestions on how to strengthen the value of this training. So please send us your feedback on what you would like to see. On our final slide, it shows the remaining webinars in the 2020 series. The next webinar, titled Behind the Meter Projects, will be held on August 26, 2020 at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Thank you again for your interest and attendance. We look forward to you joining us for future webinars. And this concludes our webinar for today. Good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.